how does a kid's sensory system show up when they've been either properly diagnosed or you may be suspicious that they have ADHD or autism, some kind of neurodiversity going on?
I've heard a quote, if you've met one kid with autism, you've met one kid with autism. And it's the same with ADHD. Everyone is so different that it just really depends on who they are. So many of the kids that I see have both ADHD and or autism. Many of them have sensory challenges, but it's like so individualized.
Hi, it's Kate from ADHDkidscanthrive.com. Before we start, I want to address the fact that I know how overwhelming it can feel to parent a child with ADHD. The questions, the challenges, the desires to give your child the best possible chance to thrive is a lot to carry for parents. That's why I want to share my journey with you through my book, How We Roll: A Parent's Journey on Raising a Child with ADHD. I've had the privilege of helping many parents like you navigate the journey of raising a child with ADHD. We've worked together to create brighter paths. All my experiences, practical tips, heartfelt insights are narrowed down into this book. To help you get started, I've made the first 3 chapters of the book available to you for free. You can check out through the link in the show notes below. Hi, it's Kate Brownfield from ADHDkidscanthrive.com. I am your host of the ADHD Kids Can Thrive podcast. I'm also an ADHD parent coach and an author. Today, I am honored to be joined by Julie Abrams. She's an OT for neurodiverse children and an ADHD parent coach in the Colorado area. She joins me today to give us an education in understanding a child's sensory system, how it impacts them, and when to seek support. It's a pleasure to have her join us today. Please enjoy our conversations. Hi, Julie. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm looking forward to talking to you. All right, I've brought you onto the podcast today as our OT guru to inform us just from kind of a high level about what OT is and how it may help our children, especially when they have ADHD. So
Great.
So to start, I thought we should start with what is an OT?
Yeah.
And how can they help children who have ADHD and autism?
It's a great question. And for a long time, I like to tell people that my first semester of grad school, we spent the entire semester defining what occupational therapy is because it's so unknown.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you don't know what it is, don't worry, nobody does.
But you know, right?
Yes, I've been doing it for a long time. So occupation is doing. Occupational therapy is skills for the job of living. And in the work that I do, working with kids' occupations are being a student, being a child, and being a friend. And as an OT, I work to support them to be able to be successful in those things and in those areas. So it's working on improving attention span, sometimes facilitating social skills, and even, with little ones on up, working on play skills as well.
Okay, so can you say those 3 again? What is the occupation of children? That's amazing. So it's being a student,
being a friend, and just being a child. The child's occupation is to be able to play, and it's really important for development.
Okay, so an OT can help a child who may be struggling or in one or all of those things?
Yeah, and so that's kind of the general occupation. And then within those, as an OT, we look at how they're doing in their fine motor skills. So those are the skills that are using the smaller muscles, like writing, using silverware, those kind of things. And then we also look at gross motor skills, and those are the larger muscle groups. So are they able to access playground equipment, ride a bike, swim, whatever the case may be. And even, are they able to sit upright in a chair? Because that is required to be able to pay attention. So I always say that as an OT, I look at fine motor skills, gross motor skills, and attention skills.
Okay. Very interesting. Okay. So tell us a little bit about, just in general, what is a child's sensory system?
All right. So I have a really great visual that I would love to share, and I can describe it as
Okay.
well.
Pull it up. Okay.
So in kindergarten, we learn about our outer senses. So those are things like smell, look, hear, touch, and taste. And we learn what those things are. As an occupational therapist whose focus is one sensory system, I really focus on the inner senses. And those are tactile, vestibular, and proprioception. And I'm going to tell you more about those. But in the graphic that I'm showing you, I have a pyramid. And the pyramid is the base is the foundation, and that's the central nervous system. Our eventual goal is to get to academic learning. So that's being a student. That's one of the child's occupations. And in order to do that, we have all of these things in the middle that are required to do our very best in academic learning. So our central nervous system has to be regulated, and we do that through these inner senses that I just mentioned, the tactile system, the vestibular system, and the proprioceptive system. And then we add on top of those outer senses, and then things like postural security, which means that you feel comfortable being upright using both sides of your body, and eye-hand coordination, being able to participate in your daily living skills, and it goes up from there to that academic learning.
Wow. Okay. So I have a question. So
Right.
are these systems supposed to kind of be naturally falling into place by the time you're 5 years old? So you're ready for kindergarten?
Ideally, yes.
And it is a natural process for typical kids?
Yes.
Okay.
And this is a beautiful graphic, and it has everything nicely stacked. And as we know, humans do not develop in such a linear fashion, but there are foundational skills that are required in which to build other skills. So this is just a good starting point.
Okay. So here's my question about, like, how does a kid's sensory system show up when they've been either properly diagnosed, or you may be suspicious that they have ADHD or autism, some kind of neurodiversity going on?
Yeah. So I've heard a quote: if you've met one kid with autism, you've met one kid with autism. And it's the same with ADHD. Everyone is so different that it just really depends on who they are. So many of the kids that I see have both ADHD and or autism. Many of them have sensory challenges, but it's like so individualized.
Okay. So you, as the expert, if somebody was seeking out OT, you would be able to, with your expertise, kind of figure out where these gaps are in their sensory system? Okay. And kind of start to build a foundation that builds upon that.
And my ideal goal is to teach the parents and eventually the kid, depending on how the child is, to understand what their system is and what they need and what they can do for it to be better regulated.
Yeah. Okay. All right. What are the flags that a parent would see
Okay.
in
Let
their
me
kid?
let me explain each of the systems, and then I can tell you about the flags because I think that they go along with each one.
Okay, great.
Okay. Okay. So we have the tactile system, which is your body's overall way of perceiving tactile information. So it could be like the clothes on your body, the tag in your shirt, standing in line to go, into the classroom. So those are all different things that your body, that the skin receptors are taking in. And many of us, right, put clothes on and habituate, which is we get used to those clothes and we don't even notice them anymore. And then we're able to learn and focus. But if your sensory system is misperceiving information and there's a tag in the back of your shirt that's so itchy that it's really bothering you, then all you're going to think about and focus on is that tag. So we want to really work, if there are challenges in that tactile system, to desensitize it so that you can then move on to be able to learn. That's the eventual goal. And sometimes we see it with picky eating, and we can see it, there's with even other, sometimes it's hearing. That's a different system, and it kind of all goes together when we when we look at it, just what we're perceiving in our environment.
Okay. So what's the next piece?
So then we have vestibular input, which is our most basic sense. It's the balance sense, and it's the way that you move through space and the way that you perceive that. And it's also kind of really holds the foundation for everything, but it also helps us with being upright. So the vestibular system is activated when your head is moved out of midline. So swaying side to side, starting to crawl, walk. Those are all ways that we are using our vestibular system.
And is your vestibular system like your core? It's deeper than that.
Yeah, it is, and it can be related. And what I was going to say is that's really what we start with these systems, is making sure that we have a strong core, because we have to be able to hold ourselves upright in order to move. And we need to be, move, sit, and eventually pay attention.
Okay.
And then we have the proprioceptive system, which is proprioception is your awareness of where you are in body and space. And the input is through the joints, muscles, ligaments, and tendons. And to me, it's the most powerful of the systems, because it can really be calming and organizing for the nervous system. So I use examples of people that I know of that wake up every morning and go for a run. That really sets your sensory system, because you're getting all of that proprioceptive input into your joints, muscles, ligaments, and tendons, which is very regulating.
Okay.
So I think that even those who don't have, what we call sensory issues or challenges, they understand, oh, running is my therapy, or, those kind of quotes that you might see around. And it makes a lot of sense when you really have a deep understanding of your sensory system.
Okay. So you think of like kids too, probably riding their bikes to school.
Yes.
Or walking to school. Is that
a great way to start
your day? Interesting. And we've really eliminated that in our society.
I know. I think a lot about babies, because this is the foundation, right? Is I look back and I say, did your baby crawl? How old was your, child when they walked? And being able to look at all of the history gives me somewhat of an indication on what they've done and what I might need to go back to in order to make sure that the sensory system is the best that it can be.
So my question is, if you work on your sensory system when you're younger, if you're seeing flags, which I think people listening probably can start to go, oh, my child's struggling with that aspect or this or whatever. Is it a fix? Like, can you build the sensory system, I guess, to be stronger, and then it carries you forward for the rest of your life?
I think there's a combination. So the whole theory stems from sensory integration, and it's the ability to process all of the information from the world and the environment to make sense of the world and to be organized. And so, yeah, there is a lot of plasticity, especially in those early years, but on up, where we can make really great change, where you can put clothes on and not notice that it's there, or have a tag in your shirt that's not sending off a fight or flight response because you're misperceiving it as a bug or something that's dangerous.
Right.
Yeah, we can definitely make change and kind of better integrate those neural responses. And at the same time, we can also learn accommodations and modifications that can help. So if we're not there quite yet, we could cut the tags out of our shirt. I use that one just because it's easy and it's very relatable.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the one too, though. Can you explain a little bit more about kids not understanding how they fit into space, into
Yes,
their own space?
kids that are clumsy, tripping over things, bumping into other people, or crashing into you, or
Yeah. So hyper.
yes. So it's that constant need for input because they might feel like they don't know where they are or they want more. And so seeking of that input is telling us they need more. They need to better recognize where they are, or they need more input in general.
And would be the hyperactive boys or girls fit into that part of your sensory system? Okay.
Yeah, and it's just really, yeah, we call them sensory seekers. So they're really seeking a lot of input, and we often see that in the mouth as well. So chewing is proprioceptive input, and that we can get in the mouth. So when you see kids who are like chewing on their shirts or on their sleeves or on their fingernails, that's also an indication that they might need more input, and you can do it in the mouth or in the body.
Oh, fascinating. Okay.
So,
Okay.
chewing on gum,
Yeah.
pen cap, right? Like there's a lot of the strap of your backpack. There's a lot of things you can chew on. And when I first started, we had to just be super creative with what we were going to give kids to chew on. And now you can go on Amazon or wherever and you can type in chewy necklaces, and there's many to choose from. Just make sure that they're safe without additional.
Okay. And so if you do that, you're giving the kid you're relieving their sensory system, giving them the right
Or
the
helping
input.
helping them organize it by giving them input, because and especially at school. So we've got, let's say, this hyperactive child who really needs to move. There's not a ton of opportunities at school for that to happen. As a result, we still want to be able to satisfy that sensory system, so we can get some proprioceptive input in the mouth. And so that's where we would get an accommodation for gum or for some chewy, or they even have like pencil toppers that you can stick at the top of the pencil and chew on them. Teachers don't always love them because spittle.
Yeah. No, I know. Okay, so I was just at the CHAD conference, and the author of ADHD is Awesome, Pen Holders, Miss. He said he chewed on his shirt the whole time growing up in his life. Like he just chewed on his sweatshirt or his shirt through most of his life.
Yeah,
So, which is a common.
it's very common. I love using foods as a way to satisfy that need too, like jerky, or or you buy the jerky and leave it out for a few days so it's extra chewy. Even bagels can be really chewy. That can help. Dried mango is a great one that's really popular right now. So you can also have accommodations for snacks if needed, and those could be
Oh, part of your snacks. Okay, to kind of feed your system. Very interesting. Okay, so listening to you, give us as parents of ADHD kids or neurodiverse kids here, what are we've talked a little bit on the food. What are some other ways parents can nurture at home or from home their children's sensory system?
That's a great question. I'm glad
So
you brought it up because I was like, oh, I want to get there now. So what as OTs, what we do is we work with families and to look at what the kid is seeking in frequency, intensity, and duration. And together we come up with what is called a sensory diet. And a sensory diet is not something that you eat. It's basically a routine that you use to nourish the body. So what is going to satisfy the need of the kid that I am seeing to best help them be able to be calm, focused, and be able to learn. And of course, they're kids, right? So we're not expecting that all of the time, but at school, there are, often high expectations. So it's good to have some ideas on things that you can do.
Okay. And what would those things kind of look like?
So we have two kind of general kids, right? We have the sensory seekers, which is what we talked about with that hyperactive kid who's really looking for a lot of input. And then we have sensory avoiders who don't want to move at all and are very hesitant. And then we often have kids who are a combination of both. But for the seekers tend to, be a little bit more squeaky because they tend to be more disruptive. So I love the idea of, biking to school or walking to school or going for a run before school if possible. And if not, can we use food to satisfy that need, like drinking a smoothie through a straw or a milkshake or like a protein shake, something like that, so that you're getting some proprioceptive input into the mouth. I also will recommend, like, if families have a mini trampoline or even a Bosie ball, they could just jump on that for 10 minutes before going to school. I understand that the morning routine can be very challenging.
Yes. It's crunch time.
Yeah. So is that realistic? Maybe. It just depends. Or even, just having a little extra weight in the backpack, because that is proprioceptive input that's being put on the shoulders that could be regulating as well.
Okay. It's a good strategy. And then what about the kids who are avoiding movement? How do you make them move?
Well, depending on who they are, right? That's where the skill of OT comes in. Because I'm working with a little girl right now who's 3 years old, and she's very hesitant, and just through repetition and rapport and that feeling of success, she is climbing up a ladder, going down a slide, holding my hand, swinging on swings, all things she didn't do when she first started. And her mom was like, oh, she's never going to do these things. And I said, don't worry, I'll get her there.
And it's like,
Really exciting. Jumping on the trampoline is really terrifying. And,
she's doing it.
getting there. So really gently, right? We want them to feel successes so that they feel like they can do it. We don't want to just throw them right in, because what happens with sensory integration dysfunction is a misperception of sensory input. And so if you feel like you're going to fall all the time, and that's why you're so hesitant, and then you just get thrown into a trampoline, that's going to elicit the sympathetic nervous system response, which we're trying to avoid. So sometimes it can be that extreme.
Okay.
But repetition, routine, structure, predictability can be really helpful.
Really helpful. Okay. So I'm getting a sense, but just for parents, like, what are the flags? And like, when do you seek out an OT specialist to help you with your child versus try to like create your own routines at home versus letting your kid like go to the park or just play outside and kind of setting those routines versus like how do you as a parent decide like, wow, we probably need some more professional intervention here to help my child with their development?
I think that when it feels really hard, it shouldn't feel that hard. And that's when you could call. OTs in general, we look at what we call ADLs, and it's activities of daily living. So that's getting dressed, brushing your teeth, taking a bath or a shower, going to school, playing at the playground, going to the grocery store, having dinner together as a family. Those are some examples of activities of daily living. And when either one or more of those just seems so hard that you don't want to do it, that's definitely a time to call for help. I have families who cannot take their kids to the grocery store or Target or Walmart. It's just way too overwhelming for them.
Yeah.
That's a time that you would call. If you find yourself avoiding situations because you're fearful of how your child might behave, that's also a good time to
Time to, okay. And then what's the length of time a kid would do OT?
Oh, the $1,000,000 question. That parents always ask, and I say, if I had a crystal ball, I would be rich. And I don't have a great answer because it's so dependent on the kid. I do love to have parents join me for the sessions so that I can teach them some of the skills as well so they can carry it over at home. And if they feel like they have those skills, even if the child hasn't necessarily met those goals, then I would feel comfortable, discharging because I want to be able to fill parents' toolbox as well.
Okay. And I think you kind of alluded to this. This is something a child and their family should continue the sensory diet, right? As they continue to grow and mature.
Oh, yeah. And kind of go back to it as you need and find that it kind of ebbs and flows with the seasons. And we often need more input
At certain times of the year.
winter when we're cooped up inside, whereas there's so many naturally occurring activities outside in the summer. The need for a sensory diet isn't as strong. Well, and there's also not the demand of school.
Yes, which helps too.
Yeah.
Everybody's just more relaxed and there's more time to move your body or hopefully move your body.
Yeah.
Unless you're an avoider.
Correct. But there still are opportunities to be outside, which I think is really great, as much as you can to get outside. So one other thing I wanted to make sure that I mentioned for your listeners is with proprioceptive input, that's things like exercise, sports, but there's also a term in OT that we use, which is called heavy work. And it's just a basic way of saying proprioceptive input. But when we think about it, it's really clear for us that, okay, this kid is bouncing off the walls. He needs heavy work. And outside this time of year, especially, there's opportunities by shoveling snow, right? Shoveling is a great one, especially when that snow's got a lot of water in it. It's a really heavy activity.
Snow, yeah.
In the summer, mowing the lawn, raking, sweeping, inside.
We get so much from just chores, right?
Yeah.
Being strategic about the chores we teach our kids.
Absolutely. Yes. And that I was just going to say, that's things like helping to bring in the groceries or vacuuming, carrying laundry baskets. So these are all ways that you can kind of incorporate into your daily routine this heavy work. And the theory says that if you're doing heavy work or proprioceptive input, it lasts about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So it's something that you would want to repeat that
several times a day. I'm not for everybody, right? But for certain times, yeah. Or for certain kids and certain ages, right? So I could see, like, if a kid's sitting at school for a long time, which most of them are nowadays, right? They need it in the morning. They're going to need it when they come home.
Yeah,
then they might need it again after dinner.
absolutely. I just heard a story about a kid that I worked with for years, and he probably has ADHD and has delayed processing. And so doing his either homework or schoolwork is really hard. And his teacher is making him sit on a rock outside during recess.
Oh,
And I'm thinking, well, that's pretty much the worst thing that you can do for any kid, but especially a kid with a history of sensory issues and or a kid with ADHD who really needs the movement for their brain to be organized. So I always am happy to have a chance to talk to anyone about the importance of movement so that it can be spread across the nation of kids need recess,
they
right?
need it, especially the ADHD kids.
Yeah. But I would argue that everyone really needs
Yeah,
it.
I
Yeah.
agree.
So
And
taking
listening to you, though, it's like just so important. It's incredible that the school systems have even thought for a second that it's a way to be punitive to a kid. Yeah. So advocate, parents, if it's happening
yes,
to your
definitely.
child, right? It's not right. Okay. So, Julie, as we wrap up, are there any more words of wisdom that you would have for parents raising ADHD kiddos?
I
You've
there
said so much.
Yeah, there's so many, right? I think that, and this probably is a theme throughout many of your guests, but for parents to have an understanding of what their children are going through and who their children are makes just a huge difference. And if parents are questioning, should I get an OT eval or not? Reach out, call, because sometimes just having that understanding already is helping the kid because parents tend not to be as reactive or as maybe judgmental of their behavior. And it's interesting too, because as I've done this work for over 20 years, regularly parents will say, I really could have used this kind of thing when I was younger, or I bet my husband could have really used this when he was younger. So just learning about yourself, your own sensory system, helping your child learn about theirs and having that understanding really is really great. And what we've been talking about a lot too, Kate, is that kids do well if they can. And I think it's the same kind of thing. They just need support to be able to do well.
Yep. And OT can very much be a part of that.
Yes.
It can be part of the formula, right? And helping your child get going so they can do well
Yeah.
in their occupation of being a student, a child, and a friend. I love that.
I'm so glad. That's great.
Yeah, it's nice. Okay, Julie, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed it.